how many of you know me and know my work? Okay, how many of you don't know me from Adam? One wonders why you're here, exactly. How many of you are currently, how many of you are therapists? Oh, quite a few. How many of you are spiritual practitioners of some kind? Okay. How many of you are currently in a relationship as we speak? Mm-hmm. And how many having second thoughts about that we should probably talk about? Are relationships difficult? Relationships are really difficult. I usually say at this point, I know exactly why my marriage of 35 years has been so difficult. My wife, Belinda Berman, is a very difficult person. But it's hard for me to say that because she's in the audience today, so I have to be kind of a little bit cool. Have you ever wondered about what makes intimacy so hard? We have never wanted more from relationships, from our long-term intimate relationships than we do right now. It is historically a brand new phenomenon. It's what my pal, how many of you know Esther Perel by any chance? It's what my pal Esther calls the grand ambition of love. You will be everything to me. You know, what we used to get met by an entire village, we now expect to get met by one person for the rest of our life. Where we used to marry in order to have sex, now we marry and only have sex with one person, most of us anyway. Things have changed, but have we really changed with them? I think what we want in our relationships is we want a spiritual connection, we want aliveness, we want passion. Essentially what we want is a long-term lover relationship for the rest of our lives. We've taken how many of you are married? Oh, quite a few, okay. To the person you're with? Anyway. We've taken the stability of a long-term marriage and we've grafted onto it the passion and connection and intimacy of a romance, of a lifelong romance. And the problem is that we just don't teach our sons and daughters in this culture, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. We don't give our sons and daughters the skills that they need. We haven't been given the skills that we need that are sophisticated enough to match this new sophisticated ambition. We don't teach kids how to fight fair. We don't teach kids how to speak up for themselves. We don't teach anybody how to listen and put yourself aside and really be there for your partner. This is all stuff you pick up along the way, or you don't. Why don't we teach these things? I would like to have relationship skills taught in elementary school, junior high, high school, and college. I'd like our kids to know about as much about how to have a relationship as they would about their own physical health or social well-being. Yeah, I'll take that. Now, I'll tell you why we don't teach our kids this. I mean, you may. In our own little nuclear families, you try. But as a culture, why we don't? Because we don't live in a relationship cherishing culture. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. But we all live to this day under the rule of patriarchy. Patriarchy is the larger system. Patriarchy is the water, and we are the fish that swim in it. Now, I don't know. I've been talking about and writing about and arguing against patriarchy for 35 years now. And it's really interesting. When Obama and Michelle were in 8-9 years ago, you talked about patriarchy and half the audience would fall asleep. And you'd say feminism and half the audience would walk out the door. But something happened in 2016. I'm not going to say what exactly. But all of a sudden, the idea that we live in a post-patriarchal world and that all of that stuff is behind us is no longer real. And all of a sudden, the issue of looking at power, dominance, aggression, irresponsibility, masculinity, and traditional femininity, all of a sudden these things are really, really important to each of us and to all of us as a culture. What we do with intimacy under patriarchy is what we do with many things deemed feminine under patriarchy. And let's be clear. Patriarchy is essentially a binary. There's a split. Half of human qualities we call feminine, half of human qualities we call masculine. Is everybody clear about this? Everybody knows which side is which and what goes where. Are we clear? Okay. The other part of patriarchy is, first is the binary, and then there's the hierarchy. Give me some masculine qualities, somebody. Strong. Huh? Independent. Brave. Okay, here's some words that don't come up when I ask about masculine qualities. You ready? Love. I never hear love when I ask somebody to talk about men. Or connection. Or vulnerability. Or yearning. It's strength, independence. It's all those things. And the feminine side? What's on there? Nurture. You can stop right there. Nurture, 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 and more nurture. Sensitivity, emotionality, vulnerability, dependency, hysteria. These things, these qualities cut both ways. Now, are these qualities held as separate but equal? In the traditional setup, they are not. Masculine qualities are exalted, feminine qualities are devalued. I call this the dance of contempt. I'll be working with you guys all day today and into the evening with the wonderful Michaela. She's going to be working with the women, and we're going to be taking this stuff apart. But the thing that I have to tell you, both men and women, gay and straight and lesbian and trans and all the rest, you cannot be faithful to the model that you were raised in and be intimate at the same time. In other words, the traditional gender roles of men and women are not built for intimacy. They're built for production and consumption and stability. Intimacy is a new demand, and a great one. The second thing I want to say, and this may be a little bit different for you guys out here in California, but when I say that we historically want an intimate relationship, a long life love relationship for the first time, long walks on the beach, holding hands, heart-to-heart talks, great sex in our 60s, 70s, and beyond. When I say we, do I mean both men and women equally? Maybe in this group, because you're an enlightened group. But out there in the world where I talk most often, the push for a more intimate relationship is coming primarily from women. Here's what I am, for those of you who don't know me. In 1997, I published a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It. It's a great thing to do at a cocktail party. Oh, you published a book? I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, it was the first book ever written about male depression. Depression had been seen as a woman's disease until that book came out. And I'm very proud of my part in putting male depression on the map. I began to get calls, because there's a lot of clinical stories in the book, from California. I'm from Boston. From California to New York, wherever. Do you have somebody who does the kind of work that you do? And now I do. We have a training institute and we have therapists we've trained. Where's Bonnie? Bonnie, stand up. Bonnie is a trained relational life therapist from LA who came here. So we have therapists around the country, but back then I couldn't say that. And so what I began to say after a while was, hey, look, if you're desperate enough and crazy enough, come to Boston and we'll work together. And people started flying in to see me, couples on the brink of divorce. These are all couples that no other therapist had been able to help. And this was the last stop. I called it a relational intervention. And in this relational intervention, we spent 2 days, the three of us, face to face, 2 whole days. At the end of the 2 days, the three of us would decide together, you're back on track or you're getting a divorce. That's it. This is the last stop. And I had a pretty good track record of saving couples. And the thing that I noticed about that is, by the way, I broke most of the rules that I learned about couples therapy in these interventions. For you therapists, let me see the therapist in the room. How many of you learn in your therapy practice and training, when you're dealing with a couple, the cardinal rule is thou shalt not take sides? If you quote unquote lose your neutrality and side with one partner and say you're right, you're not so right, then you have to go to your supervisor and talk for a while about your mother. Then you regain your neutrality and you're back in the work that I do, we take sides. We side with the underprivileged one. We side with the underpowered one. I have a saying, in relationships, I want the weak to stand up, I want the mighty to melt. And here's the thing. How many of you have ever heard, you can't love somebody until you learn how to love yourself? Let me see hands. How many of you heard that? Can I ask you guys a question? What the hell does that mean? I mean, really, what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. When we first talking, what I am about here, let me be clear about what I'm about, and then I'll go back to what that means, loving yourself. In the words of the great Harvey Milk, I am here today to recruit you. I am here to invite you to live a deeply relational life instead of a linear patriarchal life. A linear patriarchal life is a lot what we've been living. And a truly relational life is something that has to be cultivated and practiced and learned. What do I mean by a truly relational life? I mean that you exist in a state of authentic connection, loving connection to yourself and to others. A state of authentic, loving connection to yourself and to others. So let's start with your relationship to yourself. Let me ask you this. How many of you here give yourselves a hard time when you screw up? I mean like a seriously hard time. How many of you give yourselves a hard time? Yeah. Hold your hands up for a second. Everybody hold your hands up who's got that. Take a look around. Let's talk about self-esteem in this culture. Every time you are engaged in aggressive, negative self-talk, you are in a shame state. You are in a self-esteem failure. What is healthy self-esteem? Which is rare in this culture and which I usually have to teach people. Healthy self-esteem, and I owe this to one of my great mentors, Pia Mellody. How many of you know Pia? Pia Mellody's work? Okay. Healthy self-esteem is your capacity to hold yourself lovingly in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections. Let me say that again. It's the capacity to hold the way you do with a child who screws up. It's your capacity to hold yourself warmly and tenderly in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections as a human being. How many of us have that? I teach it. There's a two-step process, and I'm determined to give you guys practical skills as well as abstract information. There's a two-step process of working with negative self-talk that I use. The first is you lean into that immature part of you that is giving you a hard time. And the first thing you recognize is it's you. It's an immature part of you. We call it the adaptive child part of you. Look, we tend to hold ourselves the way we were held. If you were held indulgently, you'll indulge. If you were held harshly, you'll be harsh. We recreate the relationship with ourselves that we had growing up. So loving yourself in the face of your screw-ups and imperfections is an art. It's a practice. It's like building a muscle. It's like a mindfulness practice. You have to do it. You don't think about it. You do it. I'll tell you a story. May I tell you a story? I like stories. I'll tell you a story to illustrate this. I was giving a talk like this, much bigger therapy audience, a few hundred people, and I was late, and the person making my arrangements and stuff, looking after me, said, I was signing books, and the person said, Terry, you're gonna miss your plane. I went, oh my God, and I gathered up everything and we whisked off. I'm on the plane, I got my shoes off, I got a nice glass of Chardonnay, I'm feeling great about the day, and I feel this cold splotch on my shirt. True story. And I look down, and there's this black puddle of ink all over my shirt. I've been signing with a Sharpie, and I put it back in the shirt without a lid. And the whole thing was... And not only that, but this was one of my, I hope I get on Oprah, I'm going on TV shirts. This was like a several $100... Now look, I've got ADD, and I'm always breaking things, losing things, ruining things. Ask my wife. And I'm also depressive. I've been struggling with depression ever since I've been a little boy. Now I want to tell you, when I look down at that shirt, back in the day, before I was in recovery, which I consider myself as being, and when I say recovery, I mean relational recovery. Not an addiction recovery. I mean recovering that state of secure attachment, of relatedness that is our birthright. Anyway, I feel like I'm in pretty good recovery now, but I knew I was, because formerly, if I looked down at that splotch, that could have triggered a 5-day depression. Literally. And what would it be? It would be me beating up me. When you listen to a depressed man or woman, what you're listening to is one part of the person beating up another part of the person. It's violent. It's internalized violence, emotional violence. And what I say to you, those of you who give yourselves a hard time, like me, is this. And you got to ask yourself, would I put up with somebody external talking to me like this? Would I put up with a friend or a partner saying these things to me? I would not. I would tell them to pipe down. But because it's me saying these things to me, I feel helpless. Well, I want you to push back. And so what I said to that adaptive child part of me, little Terry, little harsh Terry, who was giving me such a hard time, I said, hey, listen, let's be clear, okay? The same ADD brain that ruined this shirt is the brain that wrote the book that was being autographed. So why don't you pipe down? And it did. And when I have people begin to intervene on the way they talk to themselves, the way they relate to themselves, replace harsh transactions with more loving transactions, deliberately, consciously, and better at it as they do it. It's a revolution. And the revolution is this. In our culture, our relationship to relationships, including our relationship to ourselves, is passive. Diane was talking beautifully about complaint. Complaint, I mean, I'm a New Yorker. Complaint is my middle name. The thing about, I forgot what I was about to say. Okay, anyway, holding yourself in warm regard even when you screw up. Now, if you don't feel bad about screwing up, that's shamelessness. That's grandiosity. That sets you up to be offensive. I don't care. If you take it into an ad hominem attack, I'm a rotten person, that's shame or toxic shame. In between these two is healthy guilt. I feel bad about what I did to you. Let me make amends to you. Let me make repair with you. How can I make this better for the two of us? Shame is of no value to anybody. And one of the things when I'm working with, one of the things that's different about the work that I do from other therapies is that I pay at least as much attention to issues of grandiosity as I do issues of shame. Because I work with men, to be honest. And when you're working with men, a lot of men lead with grandiosity and have covert issues of shame, where a lot of women lead from the one down shame position and have hidden issues of grandiosity. Does everybody know what I mean by grandiosity? Superiority, being above the rules, being contemptuous of another, looking down your nose at. Psychotherapy and self-help has done a great job over 50 years of helping people come up from the one down of shame. We've done a terrible job of helping people come down from the one up of grandiosity. And if you're going to move into intimacy, you cannot be intimate from either a one up, I'm superior to you place, or a one down, I'm inferior to you place. Intimacy demands democracy. We are equal. You are no better and no worse than me. We are the same. So one of the first order of business, if you're going to love somebody else, is to learn how to straighten out your own self-esteem. Because you cannot love somebody from a shame place, and you cannot love somebody from a grandiose place. You have to get straight in order to be truly present for another human being. I want to say now how much time do I have? I have until when? 11:50, is that right? Yes. Yeah, okay. I want to say, for those of us who struggled in our relationships, that struggle is what intimacy is. Struggle is the name of the game. I take my model of what intimacy looks like from Ed Tronick. He's a Harvard developmental researcher. He's one of the first generation, along with Barry Brazelton, to stick a camera in front of mothers and infants and actually record what they do. Before this observation, we all figured out about mothers and infants from adults in analysis and went backward. Freud said that the relationship between infant and mother is one of uninterrupted oceanic bliss. I don't think Freud was a mother. If you look at real mothers and real infants, according to Ed Tronick, it's an endless dance of harmony, disharmony, and repair. Closeness, disruption, or return to closeness. This is the essential rhythm of all relationships, I believe. It's like walking. Balance, imbalance, balance. It's how we grow. It's how we extend ourselves. There's a beautiful quote by Suzuki Roshi here in California, talking about imbalance. Suffering and imbalance is the way we live. And it feels like suffering and imbalance when it's not silhouetted against the great true nature, Buddha nature. When you see it silhouetted against the great backdrop, it stops feeling so unbalanced and it starts feeling perfectly balanced. But the imbalance that you're in is how we operate. It's how we grow. The way that works in relationships is this. We tend to, and spiritual practitioners are horrible at this in particular, we tend to idealize relationships. So a good relationship is all harmony, all closeness. Just like a good body is an 18-year-old body and a good sex life is 3 times a day till you're 80 and all this nonsense. The reality is that a real relationship is about the 3 phases over and over and over again. Harmony, disillusionment, repair. Now you can go from harmony, disillusionment, and repair 12 times in one dinner conversation. Or it can last over years of your relationship. The first phase, the harmony phase, I call love without knowledge. Love without knowledge. There's a deep soul connection that this is your person. That can happen. That's real. I believe in that. I believe in love at first sight. You know that that's your person. But look, Belinda, my wife, hung up the phone after 3 hours with me, called her girlfriend and said, I'm going to marry that guy. She knew after one conversation that I was her life partner. She had no idea what the bottom of my closet looks like or my checking account. Love without knowledge is that harmony phase. The disillusionment phase comes right after. James Framo, the father of couples therapy back in the 50s, when it was assumed if you were in bed with somebody, it was your wife or husband. He wrote, the day you turn over in bed and look at the person sleeping next to you and say to yourself, oh my God, this has been a dreadful mistake. This is not the person that I fell in love with. That, says Framo, is the first day of your real marriage. Harmony, disharmony, repair. Now let me tell you something about disharmony. It sucks. And I talk about relational shame, just like individual shame. Relational shame is feeling like the couple to the left and to the right of you is fighting less and having better sex than you are. You're ashamed of your own coupledom. When in reality, everybody is struggling. When you're in disillusionment, it is hard. It can be really dark. The imperfections that your partner is throwing at you really stick in the craw. I talk to people about what I call normal marital hatred. Normal marital hatred. And I got to tell you, I've been talking about normal marital hatred for 20 years. Not one person has ever come up afterwards and said, Terry, what do you mean by that? That disharmony phase is tough, and it can really get you. And then you move into repair. That's where all the skills come in, moving from disharmony back into harmony, moving from disillusionment back into repair. That's where the skills come in. But the problem is, when you're in that disillusionment phase, you are not in the part of you, by and large, that is going, oh goody, let me use some skills. You're in the part of you that is reactive, angry, victimy, indignant, controlling, pissed off. In other words, you're in your limbic system. There are different parts of us. And in the work that I do, I say the most important question for a couples therapist, any therapist when they're talking to somebody, is not what are the stressors? Because a good couple or a well-adjusted individual will be able to handle stressors. It's not even what's the dynamic between these two. That's really important, but it's not what's critical. Here's the most critical question. You ready? Which part of you am I speaking to? Which part of you am I speaking to? Am I speaking to the adult part of you? We call it the functional adult part of you, prefrontal cortex, observing ego, the part, second consciousness, mindfulness, the part of you that can see, observe, notice, choose to do something different, the part of you that's in charge of your recovery. Or are you in the adaptive child part of you, which is an older child, but still a child? The part of you that adapted, the part of you that learned how to get along? Or are you in that sobbing, wounded part of you that's even younger? Here's the bad news. It is only the functional adult part of us that will use skills. It is only the functional adult part of us that wants to be intimate. The wounded child part of us is just overwhelmed. And the adaptive child part of us is not about intimacy, it's about survival and self-protection. If you want to be intimate, the first thing you have to do is come out of your triggered self and get recentered into the functional adult part of you. Otherwise, all bets are off. Who you are will determine whether the interaction is successful or not. Not what you do, who you are. I go around the country and I do workshops for individuals and couples. And we have a million slides. And one of the slides I really like is a slide that says, other workshops teach you skills. We deal with the part of you that won't use them. So the proto skill, the skill, the first skill from which all other skills depend is mindfulness. If you don't realize that you're triggered, do some breathing, get yourself back into center, and then use your skills. The skills are going to go absolutely nowhere every single time. The first order of business, take a break. Leave if you have to leave for 5, 10 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour. Always be responsible. I'm leaving. Here's why. Here's when I'm coming back. There's an explanation and a promise of return, not a rupture. But if you need to take some time, take some time. Re-regulate yourself. Do some breathing. Do some mindfulness. Do some inner child work. Talk to your little boy or little girl that's so triggered. I'll tell you a story. I like to tell stories. This is inner child work, which we do. This is Robert Bly. And how many of you know Robert? Robert Bly, men's movement? Yeah. So it was back when he was 60. His wife was throwing him a 60-year birthday party. And he was doing that typical male thing. He was being like, where's my socks? It's my goddamn birthday party. I can't even get a clean pair of socks around here. What the hell's going on? He was doing that thing. Any of you guys know that at all? I don't know. I've never done that, but maybe you have. Anyway, but being a guy who works on himself and a poet, and a part of the men's movement, he wasn't content just to act that out. So he sat down, he went to the bathroom, sat down on the john, closed his eyes, and looked into himself. And he said, what's going on? Well, what are you so disgruntled about? And as he tells the story, what came floating up to him was him at 6, the 6-year-old him. And Robert grew up in an alcoholic, abusive, violent family. The 6-year-old was pissed. And the 6-year-old says to him, yeah, sure, the 60th birthday party for you, old man. Who the hell needs that? I am the little boy. I'm the one that should have had the birthday party. What the fuck about me? Who cares about you? And Robert said, he looked at that little boy, and he put him up on his lap, and he put his arms around him. And he said to him, hey, listen, I'll tell you what. That party downstairs, you stick with me. It'll be our party. All those other people out there, fuck them. That's inner child work. After he did that work, he came back and he was not the bear that he was before he did that work. That's our responsibility. If you're triggered, it's your responsibility to do some inquiry. Gosh, what's going on with me right now? And that you get a grip on it and don't just act it out. You move from disharmony back, you move from the triggered state into a more centered state, and you move from disharmony back into repair. Now, what does repair mean? A lot of people that I work with have no idea what repair means. As I said, the relationship to relationships is passive. In our culture, you get what you get, and then if you don't like it, you complain about it. That's how we try and get more of what we want, is by complaining about what went wrong. This is the worst behavioral modification program I've ever heard. Would you do this to a dog? Would you punish a dog every time it did something wrong and not give him any rewards when he did it right? But we do this with our partners. I was on Good Morning America once. I said, I want men and women across America to treat each other as well as they treat their dogs. And as cleverly as we treat our dogs. Because you reward good behavior as well as just bitching about what went wrong. So there are 3 phases. I told you I'd be practical. There are 3 phases of getting what you want in a relationship. This is the first of 5 winning strategies, getting what you want. The first is what I call daring to rock the boat. This is the phase where you grab your partner by the collar and you say, whatever it is, the way you talk disrespectfully to me, I can't take it. Or our sex life needs work. Or we're drifting apart and we don't talk to each other. Daring to rock the boat is when you grab your partner by the collar and say to him or her, this is really important to me, you better damn well pay attention. It's assertive. It's healthfully aggressive. I mean business. Pay attention. The second phase is when your partner starts to pay attention. And a lot of people, as Diane was saying, a lot of people just blow right by this phase. It's like, I need you to pay attention to this. I need you to pay attention to this. Okay, I'll pay attention to it. No, I need you to pay. Okay. And they just doesn't even compute that they're getting what they asked for. So once your partner starts to listen and tries in good faith to give you more of what you want, the second phase is let go of the sword, let go of the shield, and help out. Nobody does this. You have to be taught to do this. I call this letting him or her win. You want them to win. You know why? Because winning means they give you what you've been asking for. The relational golden rule is as follows. Ready? Tell me your name. Al, of course, Al. I'm sorry. Forgive me, my block. Al, tell me what I could give you to help you give me more of what I'm asking for. That's the relational golden rule. What can I do for you to empower you to come through for me? What do you need from me? How can I help? How many of us do that? Because when you do that, you're not thinking patriarchally, you're thinking like a team. And the shift from patriarchal thinking to relational thinking is a shift from linear thinking to what I call ecological thinking. Patriarchy rests on two pillars. Masculinity rests on two pillars. The first is the delusion of dominance, power over instead of power with, and the second is the denial of vulnerability. We're going to talk about all this. But getting back to relationships, it's not about you. It's not about objective reality. It's not about the truth. It's about the team. When you stop thinking patriarchally and start thinking relationally, you start thinking ecologically. Your relationship is your biosphere. You're not above it. You're in it. You have the humility of understanding you're a subcomponent part. It is in your interest not to pollute your biosphere over here with your anger, because you're going to breathe in that pollution over here as your partner's resentment or withdrawal. You are in the system. It's in your interest to keep that system clean. What's that old proverb? Happy wife, happy life. It's in your interest. So I don't talk to people about altruism. I talk to people about enlightened self-interest. It's in your interest to make this work for both of you. You see, when you start thinking ecologically, it's not idealized pie in the sky. It's realpolitik. For example, from a relational perspective, if one of you wins and the other one loses, you both lose. Okay, and everybody nods like, yeah. Do you know why? You know why you both lose if one of you wins and one of you loses? I'll tell you why. Because the loser will make the winner pay for it. Count on it. Count on it. It's not in your interest to bully your way through. Short-term gain, long-term resentment. Get smart. What I am trying to introduce people to, and what all these skills are about, is breaking into and preserving what I call relational joy. When I work particularly with men, I talk about the distinction between gratification and relational joy. And a lot of the people that I work with, particularly men, have no idea what real relational joy even looks like or feels like. So it goes like this. Gratification is a short-term hit of pleasure. And it's great. It's gratifying. I love it. You know, an orgasm, smoking a joint, drinking a beer, having a party with your friends, whatever. Pleasure is great in its place. Relational joy is the deeper down pleasure that you get just from the attachment itself. How many of you are parents? Let me see hands. Okay, quite a few. The easiest place to get this is parenting. You know, my little Alexander, when he was this big, I was giving him a timeout. And we don't have locks on our door, so I was holding the door shut to his room so he wouldn't come out. And he was trying to get it open, right? He's like this big, right? And I want to tell you, like lightning was coming out of the house, and the whole place was like shaking, and clouds were, it was like from a horror movie. And while I wanted to throw this little guy out the window, there was another part of my heart that was thinking, you mighty little spirit, you. You know what I mean? You're going to do all right. That's relational joy. Was he gratifying? Son of a bitch, no. Was I happy to be there? Wouldn't be anywhere else in the world. That's about the beauty of connection. And people in our culture, and I think men in particular, need to be introduced to that beauty. Because a lot of the men that I see are living lives that are driven by gratification. And they have little to no relational joy in them. They say it's the height of presumption to quote yourself, but I'm going to do it anyway. Being a narso in recovery. Here's a paraphrase anyway of the quote. It's from I Don't Want to Talk About It. Family pathology rolls from generation to generation like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. That person brings peace to his ancestors and spares the children that follow. The last thing I want to tell you is this work is not for us alone. This is a work for legacy. This is sorting out what we were handed, transforming it, and choosing what we hand on to the next generation. Remember that. One of my friends, Heidi Schleffer, a couples therapist, when she sees couples for intensives like mine, she has them bring pictures of their children. And she puts one child in each chair around them. And before she starts the work, she says to the couple, just remember, they're watching. So this is what I want you to do now. I want you to take a moment, and I want you to take a note inside yourselves, or you can jot it down. And it's this. As I'm sitting here right now as a man, as I'm sitting here right now as a woman, as a man, as a woman, the edge that I think needs working is, as a man, as a woman, the edge I need to work right now is, take 60 seconds and note that to yourself. What is my edge as a man or a woman right now? What do I need to work on? And I would like you to take this intention of working that edge with you for the rest of the day and evening. I'd like you to use it to guide you. I would like you to be that person who turns and faces the flame. I was in Maasai land. Whenever a guy tells me, but I got to be, I'm a stockbroker. I wage war all day, and then I come home and I yell at my kids. What's the problem? And I say, well, you can do one there and another. You can park your sword and shield at the front door and walk in as a peaceful man. You can do that. So, I don't know. Okay. Look, I was in Maasai land in Tanzania. And I had the privilege of doing a men's group with the elders of the tribe. For 3 nights, we had a men's group. And we asked all sorts of God and women and death and life. But I asked about manhood. And I said, in America, there's a debate There are some people who think that a good man is responsible and steady and tender and nice. And there are other people who think that a good man is fierce and strong and capable. What makes a good Marani warrior? What makes a good man? And this is a true story. The little guy about 4'3" stands up and it goes from Maasai to Swahili to English to Swahili to Maasai. And this is what he said to me, and I'm saying this to you. He said, I have no interest in talking to you about what makes a good Marani, a good warrior. I'm only interested in talking to you about what makes a great Marani. He said, now listen, when the moment calls for tenderness, a good Marani lays down his sword and shield and is sweet like a baby. When the moment calls for fierceness, a good Marani takes out his sword and he's a killer. What makes a great Marani, according to this 4'3" little guy, what makes a great Marani is knowing which moment is which. Now, if those guys in the bush in Tanzania can figure that out, we can figure that out.
Oh, I would close on this one.